Elena was 12 years old when she first heard real music. Not the kind that came from car radios or television commercials. This was different. This was the kind of music that made you stop walking and forget where you were going. She lived in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building in Chicago. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing. The hallways always smelled like cooking oil and cigarette smoke. Her family had 5 kids, and Elena was right in the middle. Not the oldest, so nobody expected much from her. Not the youngest, so nobody paid her special attention. She existed somewhere in between, like a shadow that moved through rooms without making a sound. Her father worked at a factory that processed meat. He left before sunrise and came back after dark, smelling like sweat and exhaustion. Her mother cleaned houses for rich families who lived in big homes with tall windows and gardens full of flowers. Sometimes her mother would describe those houses to Elena. She talked about the soft carpets, the paintings on the walls, the way sunlight poured through skylights like it was something magical. Elena would close her eyes and try to imagine what it felt like to live in a place like that. But imagining was dangerous. Elena had learned this early. When you grow up without much, you learn not to want things. Wanting only reminds you of what you cannot have. So, Elena kept her head down. She went to school, sat in the back of the classroom, and barely spoke. Her teachers rarely called on her. Some of them probably forgot she was there at all. At home, things were getting harder. Her older brother had started hanging around with boys from the neighborhood who stayed out late and came home with money they could not explain. Her parents fought about it almost every night. The arguments would start quiet, just sharp whispers in the kitchen, but they always grew louder. Elena would lie in bed with her pillow pressed over her ears, trying to block out the sound of her mother crying. Her father had hurt his back at work a few months earlier. The injury was bad enough that he could not lift heavy things anymore, but not bad enough for the factory to give him any real help. He started drinking more after that. Not every night, but enough that Elena learned to read his footsteps when he came through the door. Heavy and slow meant he had been drinking. Quick and steady meant it was safe. Elena never talked about any of this. Not to her teachers, not to the kids at school, not to anyone. She carried it all inside her like stones in her pockets, weighing her down but never showing on her face. The only time she felt light was when she walked home from school. Most kids took the direct route, but Elena always went 6 blocks out of her way. She did this because of a house on Maple Street. It was a small house with peeling paint and a front porch that sagged in the middle. But inside that house lived an old woman who played the piano. Every afternoon, the woman would open her front window and play. Elena did not know what the songs were called. She did not know anything about music, but she knew how it made her feel. The notes floated out through the window and wrapped around her like a warm blanket. For those few minutes, standing behind the big hedge in the front yard, where nobody could see her, Elena forgot about everything. She forgot about her brother and the trouble he was in. She forgot about her father's drinking and her mother's tears. She forgot about being invisible. The music made her feel like she existed. She did this every day for almost a year. She never got closer than the hedge. She never knocked on the door. She just listened, hidden and silent, like a ghost haunting the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Then, one day in October, everything changed. The air was cold that afternoon, and the leaves had turned orange and red. Elena was standing in her usual spot, her backpack heavy on her shoulders, her breath making small clouds in the chilly air. The woman was playing something slow and sad, notes that seemed to ache with loneliness. Elena closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. When she opened them, the old woman was standing at the window, looking right at her. Elena froze. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She had been caught. The one good thing in her life, and now it was ruined. But the woman did not look angry. She smiled. A soft and gentle smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Then, she raised her hand and waved. motioning for Elena to come inside. Elena shook her head. She was not supposed to go into strangers' houses. She was not supposed to want things. She was not supposed to exist in spaces that were not meant for her. The woman waved again, more insistently this time. Then, she disappeared from the window. A moment later, the front door opened. The woman stepped onto the porch. She was small and thin, with white hair pulled back in a bun and glasses that sat low on her nose. She wore a cardigan, the color of cranberries, and slippers that shuffled against the wooden boards. "I have seen you out here," she said. Her voice was warm, like honey in tea. "Every day, for months. You must really love music." Elena did not know what to say. She had not spoken to anyone about music before. She did not have the words. "My name is Mrs. Patterson," the woman continued. "I used to teach piano. 40 years. Can you believe it? 40 years of students coming through that door." She gestured toward the house. "These days, it is just me and the piano. We keep each other company." Elena still could not speak, but something in Mrs. Patterson's eyes made her feel safe. There was no judgment there, no pity, just kindness. "Would you like to come in?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Just for a moment. I could show you the piano. You do not have to play if you do not want to. But I thought maybe you would like to see it up close." "I'm Elena's mind raced. She thought about her mother, who would be angry if she found out. She thought about her father, who would say she was wasting time. She thought about all the reasons she should say no and walk away. But then she thought about the music. The way it made her feel seen, even when she was hiding. The way it filled the empty places inside her. She nodded. Mrs. Patterson smiled and stepped aside, holding the door open. Elena walked up the porch steps, her heart still pounding but her feet moving forward anyway. She crossed the threshold into the small house, and the first thing she saw was the piano. It was grand and black and beautiful, sitting in the center of the living room like it owned the place. Sunlight from the window made its surface shine. Elena had never seen anything so perfect in her entire life. "Go ahead," Mrs. Patterson said softly. "You can touch it." Ground. Elena walked toward the piano slowly, like it might disappear if she moved too fast. She reached out her hand and let her fingers rest on the smooth, cool surface. In that moment, standing in a stranger's living room, with her hand on a piano she had only ever heard from behind a hedge, Elena felt something shift inside her. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. For the first time in her life, she let herself want something. And that wanting would change everything. Mrs. Patterson's living room smelled like lavender and old paper. There were books everywhere, stacked on shelves that reached the ceiling, piled on side tables, even sitting in neat rows along the windowsill. Faded photographs in silver frames covered one entire wall. Pictures of students, Mrs. Patterson explained. 40 years of children who had learned to play on that very same piano. Elena stood in the middle of the room, afraid to move. She felt like she did not belong here. In this warm and gentle space, filled with memories and music. Her shoes were scuffed, and her jacket had a small hole near the pocket. She suddenly felt very aware of how she must look to this woman, who lived surrounded by beautiful things, but Mrs. Patterson did not seem to notice any of that. She walked over to the piano and sat down on the bench, patting the empty space beside her. "Come," she said. "Sit with me." Elena hesitated. Then, she walked over and sat down, keeping her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Have you ever played before?" Mrs. Patterson asked. Elena shook her head. "Would you like to try? Just one note. That is all." Elena looked at the keys. There were so many of them, black and white stretching out in both directions. She did not know which one to press. She did not know if she was allowed. "Go on," Mrs. Patterson encouraged. "Any key you like." Slowly, Elena lifted her right hand. Her finger hovered over a white key, somewhere in the middle. Then she pressed down. The note rang out, clear and pure, filling the room with a single perfect sound. It vibrated through Elena's chest and down into her stomach. It was like the note had reached inside her and touched something that had been sleeping for a very long time. She pulled her hand back quickly, almost scared by what she had felt. Mrs. Patterson watched her with knowing eyes. "That is what music does," she said softly. "It finds the places inside us that words cannot reach." Elena did not say anything, but she understood exactly what Mrs. Patterson meant. That was the first day. After that, Elena came back every afternoon. Mrs. Patterson never charged her a single dollar. When Elena tried to protest, saying she had no money and her family could not afford lessons, Mrs. Patterson simply waved her hand and said that music was not meant to be locked behind a price tag. Some things in life were too important to be sold. So Elena learned. She learned how to sit at the piano with her back straight and her wrists relaxed. She learned the names of the notes and how to read the strange symbols on sheet music. She learned scales and chords and simple songs that Mrs. Patterson had taught to hundreds of students before her. But more than that, Elena learned that she had a gift. Mrs. Patterson noticed it almost immediately. Most beginners struggled for months just to get their fingers to cooperate. They hit wrong notes and lost their timing and grew frustrated with how slowly progress came. But Elena was different. Her fingers seemed to understand what her mind had not yet learned. She picked up new pieces quickly, and when she played, there was something in her sound that was hard to explain. It was not just technical skill. It was feeling. Deep, raw, honest feeling that poured out of her and into the music. "You have something special," Mrs. Patterson told her one afternoon, about 3 months into their lessons. "I have taught many students, Elena. Very few of them had what you have." Elena did not know how to respond. No one had ever told her she was special at anything. At home, things continued to fall apart. Her brother was arrested one night in November. The police came to their apartment at 2 in the morning, banging on the door so hard that Elena thought it might break. She watched from the hallway as they put handcuffs on her brother and led him away. Her mother collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Her father stood frozen, his face blank, like something inside him had finally broken for good. After that night, the apartment felt different. Heavier. Her parents stopped fighting because they had stopped talking altogether. Her mother worked longer hours, taking on extra houses to clean just to cover the lawyer's fees. Her father drank more and more. Some nights, he did not come home at all. Elena never told Mrs. Patterson about any of this. She did not know how. The words felt stuck somewhere deep in her chest, trapped beneath layers of shame and fear. How could she explain what it felt like to watch her family crumble? How could she describe the sound of her mother crying in the bathroom when she thought no one could hear? So instead, Elena played. She poured everything into the piano. All the pain, all the confusion, all the loneliness that she carried with her every single day. When her fingers touched the keys, it was like opening a door that had been locked for years. Everything she could not say came flooding out through the music. Mrs. Patterson noticed the change. Elena's playing grew deeper, more intense. There was a sadness in her sound that had not been there before. But there was also strength, a fierce, burning determination that seemed to say she would not let the darkness swallow her whole. One evening, after a particularly emotional lesson, Mrs. Patterson made tea and sat down with Elena in the kitchen. The old woman did not ask questions. She simply said, "I know there is pain in your life. I can hear it when you play. You do not have to tell me what it is, but I want you to know that I am here, and the piano is here, whenever you need us." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, not wanting to cry. But something inside her loosened, just a little. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel completely alone. The months passed. Winter turned to spring, and spring turned to summer. Elena practiced every chance she got. At Mrs. Patterson's house, she had the real piano, but at home, she had nothing. So she made her own. She found a large piece of cardboard and drew the keys on it with a black marker. 88 keys. Just like the real thing. She taped it to the kitchen table and practiced there late at night, when everyone else was asleep. Her fingers moved silently over the paper keys, pressing down on nothing, hearing the notes only in her head. It looked foolish, she knew. Anyone who saw her would probably laugh, but Elena did not care. She was learning. She was getting better. And that was all that mattered. By the time she turned 14, Elena could play pieces that most students did not attempt until they had been studying for many years. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin. The music was difficult and demanding, requiring technical skill and emotional depth in equal measure. But Elena rose to the challenge every time. Mrs. Patterson began to talk about the future, about music schools and scholarships and competitions, about a world beyond the cramped apartment and the struggling neighborhood, about possibilities that Elena had never allowed herself to imagine. You could do something with this gift, Mrs. Patterson said one afternoon. You could go places, Elena. Far away from here. Elena wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that there was a way out, a door she could walk through into a different kind of life. But every time hope started to bloom in her chest, reality would crush it back down. Her brother was still in trouble. Her father was still drinking. Her mother was still working herself to exhaustion. And Elena was still just a poor girl from a broken family, practicing on a paper keyboard while the world outside her window continued to fall apart. She did not know if she was strong enough to escape. She did not know if escape was even possible. But she kept playing anyway, because the music was the only thing that made her feel like she was more than her circumstances. It was the only thing that reminded her she had a voice, even if that voice had no words. And somewhere deep inside, in a place she barely dared to look, Elena was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, her voice deserved to be heard. Elena was 16 when Mrs. Patterson handed her a folded piece of paper that would change everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early March. The snow outside had started to melt, leaving dirty puddles on the sidewalks and patches of brown grass poking through the white. Elena had just finished playing a difficult piece by Chopin, one she had been working on for months. Her fingers ached and her shoulders were tight, but she felt satisfied. She had finally gotten it right. Mrs. Patterson sat quietly for a moment after Elena finished. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out the paper. I want you to look at this, she said, sliding it across the piano toward Elena. Elena unfolded it carefully. It was a flyer for a summer music program at a famous conservatory on the East Coast. The program was 6 weeks long and taught by some of the best piano instructors in the country. At the bottom of the flyer, in bold letters, it said that full scholarships were available for talented students who could not afford the tuition. Elena read it twice, then looked up at Mrs. Patterson with confusion in her eyes. This is not for someone like me, she said quietly. Why not? Because look at where it is. Look at the students who go there. Elena shook her head. They come from fancy schools. They have been playing since they were 5 years old. They have parents who drive them to lessons in nice cars and buy them their own pianos. I practice on cardboard, Mrs. Patterson. Cardboard, the old woman smiled. But there was something fierce in her eyes. And yet you play better than most of them ever will. I have heard those students, Elena. I have taught some of them. They have technique, yes. They have training, but very few of them have what you have. What do I have? Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. Truth. When you play, you tell the truth. You do not hide behind perfect notes and polished performances. You let people feel something real. That is rare. That is a gift that cannot be taught. Elena looked back down at the flyer. The audition was in 6 weeks. Students had to prepare 2 contrasting pieces and perform them in front of a panel of judges. The thought of it made her stomach turn. I do not even have a way to get there, she said. It is hundreds of miles away. There is a bus, Mrs. Patterson replied. I already looked it up. The ticket is $47. I will pay for it. Elena started to protest, but Mrs. Patterson held up her hand. No arguments. You have given me something these past 4 years, Elena. You have reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Watching you learn, watching you grow. It has been the greatest joy of my life. Let me do this one thing for you. Please. Elena did not know what to say. No one had ever believed in her like this. No one had ever looked at her and seen something worth investing in. She felt tears building behind her eyes, but she forced them back. Okay, she whispered. I will try. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Elena's life. She practiced constantly. Every spare moment she had, she spent at Mrs. Patterson's house, running through her pieces again and again, until her fingers knew them better than her own name. She worked on the Chopin ballade she had been perfecting for months. For her second piece, Mrs. Patterson suggested something by Bach, a complex and mathematical composition that required precision and control. But practicing was only half the battle. At home, everything was falling apart, faster than ever. Her father had left 3 weeks before the audition. He did not say goodbye. He did not leave a note. One morning, Elena woke up, and his closet was empty. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. His chair at the kitchen table sat vacant, collecting dust. Her mother did not talk about it. She just worked more hours, her face growing thinner and more tired with each passing day. Elena's younger siblings did not understand what was happening. They kept asking when their father was coming back, and no one had an answer for them. Elena wanted to help. She wanted to stay home and take care of her brother and sister while her mother worked. She wanted to be the responsible one, the one who held everything together. But she also wanted to go to that audition. She wanted it so badly it hurt. The morning of the audition, Elena woke up before dawn. She put on the nicest clothes she owned, a simple black dress that her mother had bought at a thrift store years ago. It was slightly too big, and the hem was uneven. But it was clean, and it was hers. Her mother was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. You are really going, her mother said. It was not a question. Elena nodded. I have to. Her mother looked at her for a long moment. There was something complicated in her eyes. Sadness, maybe, or fear. But underneath it, Elena thought she saw something else, something that looked almost like pride. Come back to us, her mother said softly. Whatever happens, come back. Elena hugged her mother tightly. Then she picked up her bag and walked out the door. The bus ride took almost 8 hours. Elena sat by the window and watched the city disappear behind her, replaced by farmland and small towns and stretches of highway that seemed to go on forever. She had never been this far from home before. Everything looked different out here. Bigger, emptier, full of possibility. She arrived at the conservatory in the late afternoon. The building was massive and old, made of red brick and tall windows that reflected the setting sun. Students walked across the lawn in groups, laughing and talking like they belonged there, like they had always belonged there. Elena felt very small. She found the audition hall and signed in at a table near the entrance. The woman behind the table looked at her registration form and raised an eyebrow. Self-taught? She asked. I had a teacher, Elena said. She just was not official. The woman nodded and handed her a number. 17. Elena was the 17th student to audition that day. She found a seat in the waiting area and looked around. The other candidates were stretching their fingers, reviewing sheet music, whispering nervously to their parents. Many of them had brought their own instruments. Some had coaches who gave them last-minute advice. Elena had nothing but herself and the music inside her head. The hours crawled by. One by one, the other students were called into the audition room. Some came out smiling. Others came out with tears in their eyes. Elena tried not to watch them. She tried to focus on her breathing, on keeping her hands warm, on remembering every note of every piece she had prepared. Finally, her number was called. She stood up on legs that felt like water. She walked through the heavy wooden doors into the audition room. It was large and bright, with high ceilings and a beautiful grand piano sitting in the center. 4 judges sat behind a long table, their faces serious and unreadable. Elena walked to the piano. She sat down on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys. Her hands were shaking. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about Mrs. Patterson and her warm living room. She thought about her mother, working double shifts to keep the family alive. She thought about her father, wherever he was. She thought about all the nights she had spent practicing on cardboard, dreaming of a moment exactly like this one. Then she opened her eyes, and she began to play. The first note came out shaky. Elena felt it leave her fingers and float into the room, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The judges were watching her. The room was silent. Everything depended on what happened next. She almost stopped. She almost stood up and walked out, back to the bus station, back to Chicago, back to the life she knew. A life where no one expected anything from her. A life where she could stay invisible and safe. But then something shifted inside her. She thought about all those afternoons standing behind the hedge, listening to music that made her feel alive for the first time. She thought about Mrs. Patterson opening her door and inviting her in when she had every reason to send her away. She thought about the paper keyboard on the kitchen table, her fingers moving silently in the dark while her family slept. She had not come all this way to run. Elena closed her eyes and let go. The Chopin ballade poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. The notes came fast and fierce, building on top of each other, creating waves of sound that filled every corner of the room. Her fingers moved with a certainty she did not know she possessed. It was like the music had taken over, like it was playing her, instead of the other way around. But this was not just music. This was her story. The soft passages were her childhood. The long nights, lying awake, listening to her parents fight through thin walls. The feeling of being invisible, of walking through the world like a ghost that no one could see. The melody ached with loneliness, with the quiet desperation of a girl who had learned to keep everything locked inside. Then the tempo changed. The music grew darker, more intense. This was her brother being taken away in handcuffs. This was her father's empty chair at the kitchen table. This was her mother's tired eyes and trembling hands. The notes crashed against each other like storms, full of anger and confusion and grief. But there was something else in the music too. Something that rose up through the darkness like a flower pushing through concrete. Hope, small and fragile, but stubborn, refusing to die no matter how hard the world tried to crush it. Elena played the final passage with everything she had. The notes climbed higher and higher, reaching toward something just out of grasp. Then they softened, settling into a quiet resolution that hung in the air like a prayer. She lifted her fingers from the keys. The room was completely silent. Elena sat frozen on the bench, afraid to move. She did not know what had just happened. She did not know if it was good or bad. All she knew was that she had given everything she had. There was nothing left inside her. She looked up at the judges for the first time since she started playing. One of them, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, was crying. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she made no effort to wipe them away. She just sat there, staring at Elena like she had seen something impossible. Another judge, an older man with glasses and a serious face, was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were wet. The third judge was writing furiously on a notepad, his pen moving so fast it looked like he was trying to capture something before it disappeared. The fourth judge, a tall woman who had been introduced as a famous pianist, sat perfectly still. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that Elena could not name. something deep and powerful. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. Then the woman with silver hair cleared her throat. Her voice came out rough, like she was struggling to find the right words. "How long have you been playing?" she asked. 4 years, Elena said quietly. The judges exchanged glances. The man with glasses leaned forward. "And where did you study? Which conservatory? Which teacher?" Elena swallowed. "I did not go to a conservatory. I learned from a woman in my neighborhood. She used to be a piano teacher. She taught me for free." Elena. More glances between the judges. Elena could not tell what they were thinking. She felt exposed, like all her secrets were written on her face, for everyone to see. The famous pianist spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm and measured, but there was warmth underneath it. "What is her name?" "Your teacher." "Mrs. Patterson," Elena said. "Her name is Mrs. Patterson." The pianist nodded slowly. "She taught you technique. I can see that. Your form is good. Your timing is precise." She paused. "But that is not what we just heard." What we just heard was something else entirely. Elena did not know how to respond. She sat in silence, waiting. "That pain in your playing," the pianist continued. "That truth, where does it come from?" The question hit Elena like a punch to the chest. She thought about lying. She thought about making up a story. Something simple and clean, that would not reveal how broken her life really was. But she was tired of hiding. She was tired of pretending everything was fine when nothing had been fine for as long as she could remember. "It comes from my life," she said finally. "It comes from everything I cannot say out loud." The room fell silent again. The judges looked at each other, then back at Elena. The woman with silver hair wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "We have heard many students today," she said. "Talented students from the best schools in the country. Students who have been training since they were children, who have had every advantage and opportunity." She paused. "None of them played like you just did." Elena felt her heart stop. "Music is not just about hitting the right notes," the woman continued. "It is about communication. It is about taking what is inside you and sharing it with the world. What you just did, young lady, was communicate something so powerful that it moved every person in this room." The man with glasses nodded in agreement. "I have been judging auditions for 20 years. I have never heard anything quite like that." Elena did not know what to say. She did not know what any of this meant. She just sat there, her hands still resting on the keys, her whole body trembling. The famous pianist stood up from her chair and walked around the table toward Elena. She stopped a few feet away and looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. Respect, maybe, or recognition, like she was seeing something in Elena that Elena had never seen in herself. "You played Chopin," the pianist said. "But you made it yours. You told your story through his music. That is what separates good musicians from great ones." She reached out and placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Whatever happens with this program, I want you to remember something. You have a gift that cannot be bought or taught. You have truth, and in a world full of people who are afraid to feel, that is the most valuable thing there is." Elena finally let the tears fall. They rolled down her cheeks and dropped onto the piano keys. But she did not care anymore. She had spent her whole life being invisible, being silent, being nothing. And now, for the first time, someone had seen her, really seen her. "Thank you," she whispered. The pianist smiled. "Do not thank me. Thank yourself. And thank Mrs. Patterson." She clearly saw what we are seeing now. Elena nodded, unable to speak. She stood up from the bench on legs that barely held her. She walked toward the door, feeling the eyes of every judge on her back. Just before she reached the exit, the woman with silver hair called out, "Elena?" She turned around. "We will be in touch." Elena nodded again. Then she walked out of the audition room and into the hallway, where she leaned against the wall and let herself cry. Not sad tears this time. Something else. something that felt almost like relief. She had done it. She had told her story. And for the first time in her life, someone had listened. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after Elena returned home from the audition. She was sitting at the kitchen table, helping her younger sister with homework, when her mother walked in with the mail. There were bills. As always. Advertisements for things they could not afford. And one envelope made of thick, cream-colored paper with the conservatory's name printed in elegant letters across the top. Elena's mother set it down in front of her without saying a word. Her eyes said everything. Elena stared at the envelope for a long moment. Her hands were shaking. She had spent the past 2 weeks trying not to think about the audition. Trying not to hope. Hoping was dangerous. Hoping only led to disappointment. But here it was. The answer to a question she had been afraid to ask. She picked up the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. She unfolded it and read the first line. Dear Elena, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for a full scholarship to our summer music program. She read it again. Then again. The words did not change. Her mother was watching her, barely breathing. Her sister had stopped pretending to do homework and was staring with wide eyes. I got in, Elena whispered. I got the scholarship. Her mother's face crumpled. She pulled Elena into her arms and held her tight, sobbing into her hair. It was the first time Elena had seen her mother cry happy tears in years. That summer changed everything. Elena spent 6 weeks at the conservatory, surrounded by students who had been playing their whole lives. At first, she felt out of place. Her clothes were wrong. Her background was wrong. She did not know the same composers or the same techniques that everyone else seemed to take for granted. But when she sat down at the piano, none of that mattered. Word spread quickly about the girl from Chicago, who played like she had lived 100 lives. Students would gather outside her practice room just to listen. Teachers would stop in the hallway, drawn by the sound of her music. By the end of the summer, Elena had earned the respect of everyone at the conservatory, not because of where she came from, but because of what she could do. The program director pulled her aside on the last day. He told her that she had a future in music if she wanted it. He gave her information about scholarships and schools and competitions. He told her that doors would open for her if she kept working, kept playing, kept believing in herself. Elena went home with a folder full of possibilities. The years that followed were not easy. Nothing worth having ever is. Elena finished high school. While continuing to study with Mrs. Patterson, she applied to music schools and won scholarships that covered her tuition. She left Chicago at 18, moving to a city she had only ever seen in pictures, to study at one of the best conservatories in the country. She missed her family terribly. She called her mother every Sunday and sent money home whenever she could. Her younger siblings were growing up fast, and she hated missing so much of their lives. But she also knew that the best thing she could do for them was to succeed, to show them that it was possible to break free from the cycle they had all been born into. Her brother was released from prison during her second year of college. He called her one night, his voice rough and uncertain, to tell her he was trying to turn his life around. He had gotten a job working with young people in the neighborhood, trying to steer them away from the same mistakes he had made. Elena cried on the phone with him for an hour. She told him she was proud of him. She told him it was never too late to start over. Her father came back eventually. Not to stay, but to apologize. He showed up at her mother's apartment one afternoon, thin and tired-looking, and asked for forgiveness. Elena was not there when it happened, but her mother told her about it later. She said she had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because carrying anger was too heavy a burden. Elena understood. She had learned to let go of her own anger through music. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become part of who you are, instead of something that destroys you. Elena graduated at the top of her class. She won competitions. She performed on stages she had only ever dreamed about. Audiences around the world heard her play and felt the same thing those judges had felt in that audition room years ago. Truth, pain, hope, the whole complicated mess of being human, translated into notes and rhythms and melodies. But no matter how far she traveled, or how famous she became, Elena never forgot where she came from. She went back to Chicago often. She visited Mrs. Patterson every chance she got, sitting in that same living room where everything had started, playing on that same piano that had first taught her what music could be. Mrs. Patterson grew older and frailer with each passing year, but her eyes still lit up whenever Elena walked through the door. When Mrs. Patterson passed away at 91, Elena was holding her hand. The old woman smiled at her in those final moments and said, "You made me so proud. You made it all worth it." Elena played at her funeral. The same Chopin ballade she had performed at her audition all those years ago. The church was full of people who had known Mrs. Patterson, former students, and neighbors, and friends. They all cried. They all felt the music reach inside them and touch something deep. After the service, Elena made a decision. She started a foundation in Mrs. Patterson's name. It provided free music lessons to children from neighborhoods like the one she had grown up in. Kids who could not afford instruments or teachers or lessons. Kids who had never been told they were special. Kids who carried pain inside them that they did not know how to express. Elena visited the foundation whenever she could. She sat with the students and listened to them play. She saw herself in their eyes, in their shaky hands, in the way they looked at the piano like it was something magical and terrifying at the same time. "Music saved me," she told them. "Not because it made me famous, not because it gave me money or success. It saved me because it gave me a way to speak when I had no words. It gave me permission to feel everything I had been holding inside." She watched their faces as she spoke. Some of them nodded. Some of them looked skeptical. Some of them had tears in their eyes. "You do not have to be perfect," Elena continued. "You do not have to come from the right family or have the right background. All you have to do is tell the truth. Put everything you are into the music and let it carry you somewhere new." Years later, when people asked Elena about her life, she always came back to the same moment. That October afternoon when she was 12 years old, standing behind a hedge, listening to an old woman play piano. The moment that changed everything. She still carried the scars of her childhood. She still sometimes felt invisible, even in crowded concert halls, with thousands of people applauding her name. The pain never fully went away. But she had learned something important. Pain does not have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning. It can be the thing that cracks you open and lets the light pour through. Elena touched the piano, and her silent suffering filled the room. But it did not stay silent. It became music. It became beauty. It became a gift she could share with the world. And that made all the difference.